Well, my question of your assessment was asking you to assess the extent to which superpowers use sphere of influence to maintain their global dominance. So, again, an assess question means you have to look at both sides of how it does and how it doesn't, but it doesn't need your opinion because you're just assessing. So, paragraph one, in my opinion, could be about political and economic sphere of influence. So, what would you say? Well, your point would be that superpowers effectively use political and economic spheres of influence to maintain global dominance. Who? Well, you can talk about the USA, exerts political influence in the West through NATO, providing collective security amongst its 30 members. They're definitely the top dog when it comes to NATO. Economically, the USMCA is projected to boost US GDP by £68 billion in the kind of newly negotiated NAFTA agreement with Mexico and Canada. So, what does that mean? Well, what it means is that these spheres enable the US to shape regional governance and economic policies to its advantage. Military bases in strategic locations, such as Germany, deter adversaries and reinforce US presence in critical areas, while strengthening ties to North America and European neighbors. Okay, so within North America, economically, they're tied up together. Politically and militarily speaking, they have massive. The US has a huge influence on European foreign policy. Is that always true? Well, however, challenges do exist. There's resistance from leftist governments in Latin America, like Venezuela and Bolivia, which seek to assert sovereignty against the US influence. Okay, that threat from the US politically and economically has basically pushed Venezuela and Bolivia to completely kind of challenge that world order. But you could say this resistance does highlight the limitation of the sphere of influence. Okay, local governments may prioritize their national interests over alignments with superpower. The sustainability of such influence is further questioned by the rise of regional powers like the EU, Mercosur in the USA, in the Americas, Asia, and African Union. You could also say even that actually it depends on political mood. The MAGA movement clearly showing a retreat back into its own internal boundaries rather than the sphere of influence. But there you have it, kind of a point, evidence, analysis, counterpoint, and you sort of explain the counterpoint. Obviously, the explanation there is just a plan. It definitely needs to be beefed up a little bit to explain exactly how. Paragraph two, you can move on and talk about the cultural sphere of influence. It's not all about politics and economics and military. It's also about culture. Obviously, I'm going to use an American example again because it is our hegemonic power in the world at the minute. But you could say cultural spheres of influence also play a crucial role in superpowers. So the US, for example, exports its cultural value through media and entertainment with Hollywood, although it's only the third biggest film industry in the world after Bollywood in India and Nollywood in Nigeria. It does generate £42 billion in box office revenue in a single year in 2019. Okay, that is huge. It shows an idea of the American dream. It portrays an image of America we have in our heads. So this cultural influence enhances the US legitimacy and fosters goodwill, facilitating political and economic ties with other nations. The popularity of American culture products can lead to increase in tourism, foreign investment, enhancing its influence abroad. Okay, if you think of the all the Disneylands around the world. If you think of the people who go for coffee, they'll go for Starbucks. That kind of influence people have just by watching American movies and American sitcoms is bound to affect the way we think of the US in a positive way because we are shown such a positive image of the USA as a kind of defender of the world, etc. So the counterpoint, though, you can say, however, it's not always the case. Cultural influence can be challenged in regions with strong identities. In China, they've got the Great Firewall that protects local media by censoring foreign content. With my year 13s, I think it was 12, can't remember. I had a fun one where I asked ChatGPT what happened in Tiananmen Square, and it gave me a breakdown on how the military oppression and how it fired on its own civilians. And I asked DeepSeek, which is a Chinese equivalent of ChatGPT, and it told me, I'm a machine, I can't tell you about this information. And then I asked about the Great Famine in China for ChatGPT. It just told me the horrific stuff about how hundreds of millions of people died. Asked DeepSeek, and again it said, no can do, can't answer that. I'm a machine. And it's clearly Chinese censorship. Um, Explanation. Well, this competition for cultural influence does illustrate the complexities of soft power. Local resistance can undermine superpower effort, while spheres of influence are essential for asserting dominance. The effectiveness is increasingly being challenged by local dynamics and emerging powers. Think of Al Jazeera, a media channel. If you think of the Chinese firewall, if you think in France, for example, you can't show too many English American movies. There's definitely a challenge there. The VPNs can bypass all of these, etc. But on the whole, countries can hold a grip on its information. Russia and its media coverage of Ukraine is another good example. So I hope that gives you a good sense of how to get 12 marks out of 12.